Well, good morning.
Good morning.
And I intentionally said good morning in English because you need to try to practice your English, right? So, I mean no disrespect, but you know, that's part of this activity. So, good morning. Welcome to the third day of the workshop. And today we have a lot of things to cover. We will be busy today, but you won't have to hopefully read as much, so that's good, right? So I hope you all are all well rested. So we will begin today with the concept of refutation, but before that, Shannon is going to recap briefly about yesterday.
So yesterday we went over a lot. So we're gonna just make sure that we are all on the same morning about what exactly we did. So we talked about how to do the research, that you start with the brainstorming and making sure that you have ideas and you know what the topic is talking about. Remember how I gave the example of I didn't know how GMOs were approved or disapproved in Japan until I went through and was reading reading articles like the first one that's in the packet. So after that, then we talked about the different speeches, which are all on the board again. Very neatly, Jake did this. So we have the 1AC, which if you remember, this is where we say what the problem is and how we're gonna fix the problem, and what's the good thing that comes from that. Then we have the first negative, which introduces the bad things that will happen and why the affirmative is not a good idea or that it won't solve or it's not a big problem. And then we have the speeches that continue on from there as well. Remember that this one is where you split, where the 2NC only talks about those arguments that are about the case, and the 1 in R only talks about the arguments that are the disadvantage, the really bad thing that's gonna happen. That way you can share the work with your partner and make it a little bit harder for the affirmative, right? Because you wanna make sure you have a little bit of an edge since the affirmative gets to speak first and last. So that's your little bonus since you don't get to speak first or last. So who remembers what the difference between a constructive speech and a rebuttal speech is? How are they different from each other?
Constructive speech is an argument, and rebuttal is against of your partner. I mean, the contra arguments.
Right? Yeah, that's the first part of it. Do you have anything to add?
As for the rebuttal, you cannot provide new arguments.
Correct. Remember the construction was building the building, so we're constructing something, so it's all new. But the rebuttal is reinforcing our building. We're just making sure the judge remembers what we said and why it is more important or is a better argument than what our opponent was saying. So can the first affirmative rebuttal, can it have new arguments, though, if the 2NC makes new arguments? Can this speech have new arguments if this speech has new arguments? Yes, because this is the first time you get to respond to them. But remember, if there's no new arguments here, you can't make new arguments here, right? It's only if the 2NC makes new arguments. Does everyone remember this? Does this make at least a little bit of sense? Jake and I will do a demonstration today, so it's a lot easier to see it than look at it on the board. What questions, before we get into refutation, do you have from yesterday that Jake, myself, or Dr. Zampetti can answer?